Hey everybody, welcome to Before College TV Live. I'm Harlan Cohn, and today I am with Jeff Levy. And Jeff is an independent educational consultant, but also an expert on college affordability. He is so knowledgeable. He is so well-spoken. He's up to date on the latest information, and I am just so grateful to have Jeff with me today. Hey Jeff, welcome.
Thank you, Harlan. It's really good to be here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, this is cool, man, because you do some great work, and I want anybody who is listening to this to do a search for Jeff. Make sure you put the college piece in there, and he's done amazing work with Grown and Flown. I've seen him do unbelievable interviews, really getting deep into the college affordability piece. So I just want to put that out there because you're going to find so much insight. And I'm excited to know you not only so that we can share this with everybody else, but as my daughter, she's in 8th grade, she's going into 9th grade, and you know, it's on the horizon. So understanding this and being really prepared for it is something that I'm really excited for. So Jeff, now explain to me why you love helping students and parents to navigate this process to college and life beyond. What's compelled you?
I guess it began when I was very much in your situation, when my older daughter was in 9th or 10th grade, and this was before I was an educational consultant, but was working in the trenches of the film and television industry. And I'm not one who's prone to panic attacks, but when I saw what my very accomplished daughter, where she was heading, and looked at the price tag on those schools, I nearly wound up in the hospital.
Oh, like really close, like legitimately, you almost had a breakdown. Are we serious?
It was bad.
I like that. I mean, I don't want you to be upset, but the fact that it was so serious.
Because here I was working in an industry, not always knowing where the next paycheck was coming from,
Yeah.
like a lot of families, wanting to make sure that my daughter could achieve her dreams, and really experiencing some panic about how would I be able to afford this. So that was the genesis of my interest in financial aid, because I didn't know where to go. The resources were not readily available.
Yeah. So it's also interesting. I mean, there's many layers to you, and the reason that you do what you do to help students, to help parents, to support them when it comes to the college piece, I really want to dig deep into that. And I don't know if I have permission to go like into your past a little bit, but I'm really curious when it comes to the entertainment piece and being in that industry where there's so much uncertainty. You know, tell me a little bit about that piece and what you loved, and even something that maybe you had done that, you know, we'd be familiar with, and how you made that switch.
Oh boy. Well, the things that I have done, I mean, I've been out of that industry for close to 10 years. So the things I've done, I'm not sure if our audience would remember them or ever even heard of them.
Yeah.
More recently, the TV that I've done, Heroes, which was a big TV show about 10 or 12 years ago, Joan of Arcadia, Private Practice, which was the spinoff from Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah.
One of the last jobs I did was working with a great director, Paul Thomas Anderson, on his film Inherent Vice. Earlier, I did work with Spike Lee and John Sayles and the Maysles brothers, documentarians. So I've got a pretty broad experience.
Were you doing writing or producing, or?
I was a gaffer,
Gaffer.
which is the main lighting guy on a
Yeah.
set. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's a huge, lighting has really, it's interesting because there are so many people who are experts in lighting, especially when it comes to online video and production and that piece. And it's an art. I mean, it really is
It's an
creating.
art and a craft,
Yeah,
not that different from educational consulting.
right.
There's art and science to what I did
Yeah,
and to what I do now. I would say if there's a through line, um, it's I got to meet so many people who were achieving their dreams as directors, as writers, as actors, who came from so many different paths that the big takeaway for me, I think, as an educational consultant, is that there is no one right way to do it. There are so many ways to reach your potential.
yeah,
That's really been a valuable lesson for me.
yeah. And I want to emphasize, I mean, I think you are such an unbelievably, you know, uh, I would say beyond competent. I mean, you are so phenomenal at what you do and how you do it. And over the past 10 years, really establishing that because, I look at you as one of the foremost experts when it comes to helping students and parents to navigate the college change, the search, the selection, that piece. And I think that the connection between what you've done and how you must have done that and how you do this, it's something really fascinating. I mean, students are always taking the skills and applying it to something else, and there's that through. So when it comes to the college piece, and thanks for indulging me a little bit in that piece. When it
Thank
comes
you.
to the college piece, I was having a conversation with a mom the other day, and it was 6 feet apart, just so everybody knows, we're far away. And she has a junior who is in high school. And she said to me, we just don't know where to start. We just don't know, how do we start this? And that rang to me. I said, you know what? We need to help parents to know, how do you start? Where do you start? So that question, so Jeff, where does someone start?
I think there's a lot of talk about college fit. It's maybe in danger of being overused as a phrase, but college fit is crucial. But it's crucial if you understand what you're looking for. I think of it as three legs of a stool. There's academic fit. Where will my child be able to pursue the fields of study that interest him or her? There's social fit. Where will your child find his or her people for life?
Right.
Um, and then there's the third leg that is too often overlooked by both parents and by counselors and educational consultants like myself, and that's financial fit. Um, I don't think that a school belongs on your child's list unless it meets all three of those criteria.
Right. So then the question becomes, how do I even know if a school that my child wants to go to is on that list? Do I let my child apply to schools that aren't on that list if they're really excited to apply to those schools? And how do I help my child to go through that process of even coming up with that list, of curating the list? If affordability is my number one issue, do I then start with affordability, or do I start with the social, or do I start with where I'm going to find my people?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if one always comes before the others.
Yeah,
A lot of students I work with, a school starts because their friend told them about a school,
right,
uh, or their older sister goes to that school. So that, it can begin anywhere. But but the hard part is for parents to figure out what's affordable and what's not.
right,
And that's not easy stuff to figure out. There are a couple of rules, however, and some of them I learned as early as being a parent of a 10th grader who didn't know what he was doing,
right,
myself. The first thing is ignore the sticker price of the college.
Okay.
That will lead you into lots of mistakes. Not applying to schools that might be affordable and applying to schools that might not. Because it's not about the sticker price, it's about the net price. It's about what it's going to cost you after grants and scholarships. So just one quick example from my own life is my two daughters wound up going to an expensive, in terms of sticker price,
Right.
an expensive East Coast private institution instead of an in-state public here in California, because it cost me less out of pocket to send them there.
Really?
Comparing the sticker prices, I mean, at that time, one was $65,000, the other was $28,000, but the $65,000 price tag wound up costing me less.
Really? And then do you mention what school that was?
They both went to Columbia University.
Okay. So I mean, a really pricey school in an expensive community, and it worked out to be a better deal for them.
It was an appropriate school financially for me. I was what I would describe as middle income. If you're wealthier than I was, if you're medium high or high income and you can't afford the current sticker price of a school like that, 75 or 80,000 a year per child, then those schools may not be appropriate because they don't give a dime in merit aid, in non-need-based aid, not
Right.
a dime.
So there's so many lanes to go by. I'm sorry, there's so many lanes to go down, and the merit aid piece versus the need piece. And I know that you have explained this countless times, but for those who aren't familiar with the difference or just want to understand that, can you give us a quick crash course?
I'll make it as quick as I can.
Thanks.
The given is that the cost of college in this country is way beyond what most families can afford. So we must all be looking for ways to discount that cost. And in this crazy and complicated and counterintuitive system of financial aid, we need to really do our shopping. So for a family that is relatively high income, they're not going to get any need-based aid at schools because they don't qualify for need.
So when you say high income, so just give us a sense of what that family would look like.
Well, I'm reluctant to give a dollar amount because
Okay.
the forms, I will give a dollar amount, but I'm reluctant to do that because the forms that determine need, the FAFSA, and in about 150, in the case of about 150 schools, the CSS profile, those are the two forms. They're looking at income, they're looking at assets, they're looking at the state you live in. They're looking at the number of dependent children. There are a lot of things they're looking at, with income being the biggest driver of that. Everything else being equal, a family who owns their own home, a family who has an income of approximately $250,000 a year, with 2 or 3 children, own their own home, have some savings, that family will probably not qualify for any need-based aid.
And that's a net, that's not their gross, that's the two.
That's the adjusted gross income.
Adjusted gross income. Okay.
Line 1 of 2019's tax returns.
Right.
250,000 or more with some savings, you are probably priced out of need-based aid.
Right. And what's wonderful is you have a great blog on your website, and anyone can go to bigjeducationalconsulting.com. And when you go to, that's bigjeducationalconsulting.com, that's where you send people, correct?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. There's some terrific blogs that you've written that talk roughly about, what the income would be, what some of those different scenarios are. You also have some incredible resources, which we can talk about. But for someone who's just starting off and wants to get a sense of what schools offer more merit aid, what schools offer more need-based aid, you can get a good assessment of that. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, my partner Jennie Kent and I invented these spreadsheets because of our own needs in advising families. And they didn't exist. I mean, the data is available, but what we did was we aggregated about 500 schools. And you can download them from our website as an Excel spreadsheet. And I think next year we're going to migrate over to Google Sheets, but for now they exist as Excel sheets. And the beauty of Excel is that you can sort them for any column. So if you are a family that won't really qualify for need-based aid, but needs to search for schools that are generous with merit aid, just sort the Excel spreadsheet according to that column, and you will see in seconds the schools that are most generous with merit aid.
Yeah.
If you're the other family, and the great majority of families fall into the other category, where they will qualify for a moderate to substantial amount of need-based aid, you want to be looking for schools that are generous with need-based aid and not stingy with that.
Yeah. And it's one of the things that I've learned from doing some of my college conversations. So many students who are going to these high sticker price schools and have parents who have, they're in nice homes, they're living comfortable lives, but their parents' financials are such that they fall into a category where they can get great need-based aid. It's really wonderful. And having that information is incredible. I think it's really great for anybody who wants to just kind of go through. I was going through that. I was going through it many times. I stumbled across it after listening to your Grown and Flown interviews. And we're not going to go as deep into the weeds as you do during those conversations where listeners can ask you questions, because there are so many different scenarios. When it comes to the questions, when it comes to the most common questions that you could probably answer in your sleep, that you get repeatedly, is there one or two of those frequently asked questions that you can offer?
Well, one is, should I, and I being the parent, I mean, should we apply for financial aid, is a very common question that I get. The answer is, in most cases, you should, but like so many things in the college application process, there are pros and cons. And I can go into those if you think it's appropriate, or we can leave it
I
at
think
that.
it's interesting. I mean, I think that just knowing whether or not, my answer as someone who isn't as deeply knowledgeable on this particular topic would be to apply for financial aid, to fill out your FAFSA, to fill out your forms. I couldn't imagine there'd be a reason not to. So maybe you can start with, like, why wouldn't I, Jeff?
Because there's discrimination in the admission process against applicants with need.
Okay.
That doesn't mean you should send your child to a school you can't afford. That would be a very big mistake.
Right.
So the overwhelming majority of families should be applying for financial aid if they think they may qualify the first year or any subsequent year, because there are colleges that, if you haven't applied for financial aid as an incoming freshman, may not grant that aid if there is a downturn in the family financial profile in subsequent years. So don't game it. If you think that there's any chance you might need it, apply for it. But understand that the overwhelming majority of schools are need aware and not need blind. And schools, especially after this coming cycle, when a lot of colleges are not going to be making their class and making their tuition revenue goals, they're going to be looking for full pay families. So
Right.
there is an advantage in the admission process,
Right.
not applying for financial aid.
So I thought that when you apply, even if you don't apply for financial aid, you are still eligible for merit aid. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. So merit aid is typically earmarked for full pay families. Families who can't afford to pay the full amount will be getting hopefully need-based aid. But what about those families who don't qualify for need-based aid, for whom 70, 75, 80,000 a year is a burden they can't meet? There's merit aid for those families. So there is some crossover. Some students get both, and there's not really like two completely separate buckets that this money comes out of. But merit aid is generally given to families who don't demonstrate need.
Right. So it's not an automatic to apply for financial aid. If you go through the math, if you talk to a financial aid counselor at the school before you apply, and it becomes pretty crystal clear that you are not going to be eligible, then there's no reason to even go down that path.
This is what I would recommend families do, even before calling up the financial aid office, because a lot of those administrators may be reluctant to talk dollars and cents with you without seeing your tax returns.
Right.
Every college by law has a net price calculator on their website. Some are more accurate than others, but if you do enough of them, even if your child is in 10th grade, if you're starting to think about what colleges might they be applying to, go to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 net price calculators. You'll begin to get a sense of whether you're eligible for need-based aid or not, how much that school might cost you.
Right. So that's gonna guide you through that process. Now, if you are a parent, or let's say, I'll just say I'm a parent, we're both parents. So when a child's going through this process and says, hey, mom, dad, I want to go to an Ivy school where we know they're not going to give much merit aid, but there's a lot of need-based aid. And we also know that you know, it's going to be an expensive proposition if they get in. Should a parent say apply anyway? How do you advise a family who is in that place where they don't have 70, 80,000 a year and aren't going to be expected to get a lot of merit aid and they don't get need-based aid?
Well, one piece of important advice is to have the financial conversation with your child early in the process, not April 1st, when they've figuratively opened the envelope, found out that they got into the college of their dreams, and now you have to tell them, sorry, you can't go there because we can't afford it. That's too late. So it's important that families start thinking about their budget, start thinking early, start thinking about what college will actually cost them by doing things like going to net price calculators, and then having the difficult conversation with your child when they're in 11th grade, not when they're halfway through their senior year.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to schools and options, I'm a big fan of every student having 5 dream schools. I think one dream anything is bad, dangerous, because your dream shouldn't be dependent on one thing in one place. So when it comes to those schools that are going to give a student incredible opportunity, where they're going to have more opportunity for a better affordability fit, are there some of those schools that jump out? I know it's always, I have an idea you're not going to tell me, because you don't want to be biased for one school or another, but in broader strokes, for the family that's watching or for the kid that's watching, how can they look at some of the other options and feel like they're going to get as much value out of their experience?
When I'm working with students on growing their college list, part of my job is to introduce them to things about each college that will make them fall in love with the place. And that's my goal. I will be ultimately suggesting a list of colleges that represent, just as you say, Harlan, some dream schools that may be very difficult to get into, some schools that some of us call targets, where statistically they kind of match, and then some where they've got a high probability of admission. But I want them to be in love with all of those schools on their list. Otherwise, I don't think it belongs on the list. Some of those will be financial safeties, where I know, whether it's merit aid or need-based aid, this student is going to get in and they're going to get a great package. I mean, every year I have students in terms of merit aid, every year, who are awarded $15,000, $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 a year in merit aid. And these are not necessarily the most spectacular students at their high school. They really aren't.
Like, what's a profile? And again, I know it's so hard for you to pinpoint, but just like throw out some, range, random numbers and grades or stats.
I can't do that because
I didn't think you were. Okay. I knew you were going to do that. I ask questions where I know the answer.
But if a student is, colleges are looking for all sorts of things: high grades, high test scores. Maybe they're looking for some international applicants if they don't have it. Maybe if they're a regional school, they want some people from Los Angeles. Maybe they want students of color. There are all kinds of things that are driving bigger awards. So if you're checking a few of those boxes, high grades, strong test scores, but not 1600s on the SAT. If you're checking a few of those boxes and you are a really strong candidate for that particular school that is also generous with merit aid, I can predict that you will get 15, 20, 25,000 a year. And merit aid awards are 4-year awards. They're not just for the first
guaranteed
year. Yeah, guaranteed as long as you keep a minimum GPA at the college.
Right. That's really helpful. And I think that the idea that there are so many options in great schools, and I think that's where educational consultants really comes into play. This is something that I know high school counselors have strong opinions on. Some are big fans of independent educational consultants or educational consultants, whatever you want to, whatever the title you want to use. That piece of when is it a good fit? When is it a good idea? And how can parents and students who are approaching this decision-making process decide if they need someone and what the value of that person is going to be for them?
We're expensive. When my daughters were in high school, I couldn't have afforded me. So I'm in that strange position of knowing that I bring value to the process, a lot of it, particularly with financial aid. I'm going to be guiding you to schools that will give you awards multiples more than you're paying me, but many multiples more. But I understand that a lot of families can't afford us. So I would say if you think if you're able to, it's like seeing a shrink. There's a lot of value for most of us to see a therapist, but unfortunately not all of us can afford that. If you can, and you shop for a good one, there's going to be a lot of value.
So when it comes to the services that IECs provide, independent IECs is the acronym, I guess.
The acronym, yeah.
Or some people just say IEC. IEC. You want to go to an IE? No one really says the word. But if you do want to reach out to someone, I know on your website and your website's Big J Educational Consulting, and there are lots of independent educational consultants out there, but you list some of the things you do to help people along the process. And when it comes to the pain point, when it comes to what students need the most and where someone who does what you do can really fill in the gaps, is there a particular area where you feel there is a bigger gap where students find that value or parents find that value?
Um, a particular area that is
Whether it's
missing.
essays or whether it's the affordability piece or whether
Got it.
it's a kid who's not motivated and the parents are like, dude, you got to do this, uh,
Right.
keeping them on track in terms of a timeline.
Right. Um, Essays, I'm glad you mentioned that. Essays are very important. They take a great deal of time. And I think we are helpful. I'm someone who loves working with students on their essays. Um, the hard work is in the brainstorming stage, not in actually the writing stage. And that's something that most high school counselors just don't have the time to do. Some do a great job of it.
Right.
Financial aid, as you implied, most high school counselors won't touch it. Some will. Um, uh, very often, the function I perform is to keep the relationship between parent and student civil, so
Yeah.
that the parent is not nagging the student. Do your work already. Fill out your application. I find that students generally are very responsive to me and often not as responsive to me.
Yeah. I think that's the value is you can say the same thing that the parents are saying, but they'll actually do it
Yeah.
if you say it and they'll respect you and your opinion. Uh, there was something else that jumped out. Yes. So when it comes to having these sensitive conversations, dealing with the emotions and talking to a child or an adult child, a young adult about these decisions, do you have any tricks or tips or suggestions for those who aren't going to be able to take advantage of, your one-on-one services?
I find myself often in conversations steering parents primarily, but to some extent students, away from prestige. Um, there is, in my opinion, a deeply misinformed idea that if it's a big name school, you're going to have a better experience there. I think that is utterly incorrect. Often it's the opposite. So helping your children understand, helping yourself, first of all, if you're a parent, but then your child understand that it's great to get into Harvard, but then you have to go there for 4 years. And it may not be, and probably won't be, the experience you imagine it will be. The prestige part wears off. Then you've got 4 years of a very different experience. So figure out which are the schools where your kids will be happy, challenged, and successful.
So that is beautiful. And I subscribe to the same way of thinking and framing this decision-making process. You're in Santa Monica, right? Correct. I mean, you working with people in very competitive communities. You're not too far away from where the whole varsity blues, is it varsity? I mean, in your backyard, I would, we don't need to go into that, but I'm sure the circles that you are in, you know a lot about that. So how do you actually communicate that in a way where someone's going to listen to you and comprehend it and believe you? Because well, I believe you, but how do you help someone else to believe you?
I give them an example. Harvard Law. First year students at Harvard Law, there are about 570 of them. Where do they come from? Which undergraduate institutions do they come from? 20, 30, 40? They come from 180 different undergraduate institutions. Your life is not over if you don't get into Harvard, Princeton, or Yale. In fact, you may have an easier job doing the things that graduate schools or employers are looking for, which is to have a phenomenal experience, to reach and exceed your potential, to get a great GPA, to build relationships with your professors, to get those selective internships. Those are the schools that you will excel at and that will take you further in life.
Yeah, I love those examples. I was in an event and there was an adult who had gotten a scholarship at the University of Wyoming, and he got a free ride there, and he was sharing an office with someone at Harvard because he did his graduate program at Harvard, and was just laughing at how he went to the University of Wyoming on a free ride and ended up at Harvard, and he really felt like he won. And I am a true believer that if somebody wants something badly enough and they surround themselves with people who are living the lives they want to live, and they put themselves in the places where they could be exceptional, and every state school and every school that has merit aid and every school that has need-based aid, they have these places and they have these people. It's just very hard for students to see that. And I think it's especially hard in competitive communities where everybody's looking at everyone's bumper sticker to know that. And I think that, you know, I like hearing that. I think it's important to hear that. And I have a strong opinion of that. And clearly you do as well. When it comes to starting college search, when it comes to where do I start, sending parents, sending students to a particular website or portal, is there some place that you encourage them to go? Or do you have any favorites that you can share before we wrap things up?
I think the single best college guidebook there is the Fisk Guide to Colleges. It's what's called a subjective guide. It isn't filled with lots of data. It's filled with a write-up and a few other things that I think gives the reader a sense of what this school is really about. When I first became interested in this profession, that was my pleasure reading, is going through the Fisk Guide, learning about colleges I hadn't yet visited. I have since visited close to 400 colleges, and I love visiting colleges. And when our world reopens, I highly recommend that parents and students go visit as many schools as you possibly can, time and money provided. But short of actually visiting, I think the Fisk Guide is a great place to start.
That's great. You know, I've gotten to know Ted, Edward Fisk. I call him Ted. You know, we've had some dinners together because Source Books publishes his guide, and whenever we go to NACAC, because we'll go to NACAC, and he'll be there. We get a chance to visit, and I just light up because as wonderful as that guide is, he is equally as wonderful. And I see him running around the college fair. You know, they've got him and the editor, they're getting their notes, and, you know, takes a lot of pride and puts a lot of care and love into that guide. So it's nice to hear that. And I've seen everybody comes by the booth and they all want the Fisk Guide. And this thing's like a phone book. It's like 3 phone books. So that's really wonderful. It wouldn't be appropriate and right if I didn't ask you, and I know you don't have the answer, but I got to ask you, when it comes to COVID, when it comes to college search and selection and this whole thing that's going on, I mean, how do you do this? How do you guide people? What has been your philosophy to help and guide students through this really unusual time?
Well, colleges are doing everything they can now to reach out to prospective students. So there are a lot of resources on their websites, which would give you a virtual tour, for example. Another opportunity that high school students have now is to ask to be connected to a current student at those schools, just to have a conversation with a current student. So I would that's what I'm recommending to my students
Yeah.
for right now.
Well, and I've seen from talking to so many of these students, more so than ever, they are so accessible, they're so available, they're so empathetic. They really want to help students. So for the high school students who are watching this, know that these people, they want to help you. And if you've seen my college conversations, they're always like, yes, I want to help you. I want to talk to you. These people are just you in the future, and they truly want to help. So everybody can go to Big J Educational Consulting.com. Is there anything else that you want to share for those who would like to learn more about you and what you do?
That's the one question I'm having a hard time answering, Harlan. No, I think uh, um, uh, go to my resources, click on, so if you go to my website, click on the resources link and it'll take you right there and download them for free. As you so kindly suggested, I've got some blog posts there that I think families may find interesting. I guess the last thought I have, and it's not a resource, but there's no predicting the path your child will take to get to where they want to go. And I think we need to give them space and time to explore. And sometimes the decision to go to one school rather than another may sound frivolous and maybe even immature to parents. Trust our kids. If they own the decision of where they will enroll, there's a much higher likelihood they will succeed than if they go somewhere that they feel they're being pushed to go.
Yeah, that's a really powerful thought of really empowering kids to answer the question, what do I want? And be able to answer that in a way where they own it and really have an emotional stake. And I've seen that as well. And even if it doesn't turn out exactly the way that they thought, or that the parent thinks, to own that experience will lead them to somewhere great. I was talking to a counselor at a high school. There was a student who was exceptional, applied to Brown, but they didn't think they were going to be able to afford Brown. But she said, why don't you apply anyway? And he also applied to a state school, and it was an exceptional student. Well, the worst thing happened. He got into Brown. The counselor was so distraught. He also got into this other state school and was given a full ride if he wanted to go to the honors program. So now the counselor said, I just feel so terrible. I had him apply. They fall into that category where their EFC was going to be zero. It was going to cost about $240,000, something like that. And he could either finance his education or get the free ride at the other school. So in that situation, and I could tell you how it ended in a moment, but would you say that kid shouldn't have applied, or is applying and getting into Brown and then deciding what you want to do empowering, or is it heartbreaking?
Well, I think you need to have the conversation with your child early in the process. And if they understand, if we don't get any financial aid from Brown, we are unable to afford the $240,000. It's your choice. And leave the choice up to the, at least that way he'll have the he'll have the satisfaction of having gotten in, but the understanding that bar a miracle, he's not going to be able to go.
Yeah. And the way that one resolved, he got in, he actually measured, he's a very thoughtful guy. And he read Frank Bruni's book, Where You Go Is Not Who You Are. And he saw that if I go to the state school and I have the free ride, and it was an honors program, an exceptional school, he realized that he could be in a position to go wherever he wants to go if he wants to pursue an additional degree. And that's what he did. And he knew that he could have gone to Brown. And in a sense, I think there was something very exciting about him rejecting Brown to forge a path that was based on what he wanted and making smart choices to set him up for that next stage in life. So, but having the conversation beforehand, I think, is really an important piece of that, and something that,
And as you say, letting the student own the decision,
right.
crucial in that being a successful outcome.
but not co-signing. Because there's no way that the parent's going to co-sign on that one. No way, man. I'll let you get as far as bringing the pen to me. And I'm going to say, no way. You're going to the other school. You're going to the honors program, man. You'll hate me for 4 years. You're going to love me in 7 or 8.
I think, I think honors programs are a great option for a lot of students. They're wonderful in every way, financially, of course, but like a small liberal arts school within a large university setting. I think it's a terrific option.
Yeah, I like those as well. Thank you so much for being here. You're so generous. Your resources are so wonderful for anyone who wants to just have a baseline of how to approach college search and selection, especially the affordability piece. I really encourage you to check out Jeff's resource and Jennie's resources as well at bigjeducationalconsulting.com. I'm Harlan Cohen. This has been Before College TV Live. I'm grateful to have you here. I look forward to continuing to be in your corner and continuing this conversation. Thanks, everybody.